It's becoming increasingly clear the Dolphins have little choice but to reinvent their offensive line philosophy this offseason, regardless of what changes are made. So, which pieces that are currently in place can be a long term piece of the puzzle? We're looking at here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami, and the NFL Draft Lead for the 33rd team. I want to give a special shout out and thank you to our everydayers because it is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. We don't just say it. We live it. This episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use in all lowercase Locked On NFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. You all have spoken. We did yesterday a look at a hypothetical Miami Dolphins general manager vacancy and how attractive that job would be yesterday on the program. And it was the most viewed and listened to episode of the podcast since week 4. Message received loud and clear. So Thursdays, we're still going to do crossover Thursday. We'll still get ready for the game on Sunday against the San Francisco 49ers on Friday. But these big picture conversations, we have 15 weeks worth of games. We have 16 weeks worth of games coming up here, right? But Miami, they played 14 games. We've got 3 games left to play. We understand the body of work while acknowledging that the body of work is not quite done yet. So we want to do a couple things here today on this show. I'm going to walk you guys through an illustration of my offensive line grades that I have done for this team this season on a game-by-game basis. I want to walk through the players that are under contract, what that looks like, what the barriers are to those players being successful. And I want to walk through a wish list for what this off season looks like from an offensive line perspective. I have a name. I'm going to invoke a name, but not get too married into exact personnel because those are individual deep dives we can get into when the time comes. So let's start with the grades for this season. And if you're not familiar with how I do my grading, I think it's important to at least give you a disclaimer here first. The way I do my grading is I watch and grade every player on every play from scrimmage, offense and defense, on a +2 to -2 scale. And if on any given play you appropriately, but only appropriately, execute based off of your assignment, the defender and the leverage of the defender, what you were asked to do on the play. So it doesn't get into like how robust is the play design. It's on this play, what are you asked to do? And are you doing it above or below or to expectation of what just the basic call for the play is for you as an individual player? So I've done this and if you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to pull up the sheet. Every player on every play for the entirety of the season. It's a lot of snaps. It's a lot of data collection, but what it allows you to do is it allows you to then really look and see performance trends, things that are troubling, and how the team is growing and evolving. And that's where, when you look at the grades trends for the season, it's very alarming to see the ideology is that guards are not inconsequential, but guards are an ancillary piece of a roster construction. That has been the philosophy. It is the philosophy of the San Francisco 49ers with the Shanahan scheme. It is very clearly the philosophy of Mike McDaniel and the Miami Dolphins. It wasn't always this way with Chris Grier, so I don't think this is a Chris Grier exclusive thing. I think this is more of a Mike McDaniel Shanahan offense ideology that's been implemented. But with the guys that you have, it does not work. And then you compound that with, over the last 3 seasons, the missed time from the tackles, and last year, the missed time from the center, and you have just got yourself a group that has found very little in the way of continuity. And it's frustrating for me to look at the grades. I've got the grades up. You could see the grades here on the sheet if you're watching on YouTube, but I will talk through the trends here and the numbers. A 0 is to expectation. So you want to be above the threshold of a 0 on any given week, because that means you performed your job above expectation across all of your snaps. So this is a per snap average above or below expectation illustration in every game that's been played thus far this season. Of players that have played in 20 snaps or more in games this season, the right side of your offensive line against Houston, Jackson Carman, it was the second worst individual player performance on either side of the ball for any player that's played at least 20 snaps in a game. Liam Eichenberg was the fourth worst performance. The only 2 player performances that are in that stratosphere of, wow, that was bad, of those 2 guys playing side by side. And I get it. Jackson Carman's a practice squad player. He shouldn't be playing. He had some bad luck. Kendall Lamb couldn't go on top of Austin Jackson being hurt, on top of Terron Armstead not being able to go. But those were the players you chose to commit to, right? The only 2 player performances elsewhere on the team, Skylar Thompson, week 3 against Seattle, and David Long, week 9 against Arizona, or week 8 against Arizona. Those are the only 2 player performances that graded as poorly as the right side of your offensive line played next to each other against Houston. That's how bad things are right now, right? But you still look at that, and you've had, 5 positions on the offensive line across 14 games thus far. And I'm not a math guy, but I have my calculator out here. I can tell you that's 70 offensive performances thus far this season for spots along the offensive line in games. And you have had your center position, which is the green line here on the chart, has had 1 below expectation performance all season long. It's against the Raiders. They did some good stuff. They had some aggressive guys up front and put guys in your face. Your starting tackles, Terron Armstead, who is the kind of navy blue, and Austin Jackson, who is purple. Those guys combined posted 1 below expectation game performance this season. And it was Austin Jackson week 2 against Von Miller in Buffalo when he got teed off on when the Dolphins were down 3 touchdowns the entirety of the second half. Because Austin Jackson was above expectation the first half of that game. I remember grading it. I remember the discourse around that game. So your designated starting tackles and starting center across that's 3 spots. And those are the positions they've chose to pay. They paid Aaron Brewer. They paid Austin Jackson. They paid Terron Armstead. Those guys combined have given you 2 below expectations performances on a play-by-play basis all season long. Even Patrick Paul, whose first start came against Tennessee, it was below expectation, and he had a rough showing in 19 snap opportunities against New England, but he's been at or above expectation in each of the last 3 games that he's played this year. That was the appearance against Green Bay in very limited work, and then the last 2 games, which he played effectively the entire game, he's been above expectation. You invested a second-round pick in this player. He's performing at or above expectation for the majority of his snaps. And if you took the aggregate for the season, it looks good. That's a really good development. And when we ask the question, who are the long-term pieces that you can work with, that's a piece of the puzzle you should feel good about. But then there's these guards. These guards who are the lines in red look like a roller coaster that every couple of weeks gives you a performance that bumps over the 2 expectation line and then comes back down. You've had across the, let me make sure I get the numbers right here. Across the 42 opportunities that you've had for tackles and center, the two positions that the two spots that you've chosen to invest in and pay, you have had 7 total below expectation performances in 14 games from those 3 spots on the offensive line. It's about 16% of your opportunities have been below expectation. So you've invested money there and it's shown up, and you've got players that have afforded you respectable or good performances on your offensive line. The guard spots, the 2 spots that you held serve with Rob Jones, Isaiah Wynn, Lester Cotton, and Liam Eichenberg. You looked at that group all year last year. You said that they played. You made the bet that they were going to get better. And they have given you 20 below performance expectations across a grand total of 28 opportunities. It's 70% of the time. 70% of the opportunities that these guys have had to come in and play as starters, or even Lester Cotton coming in and performing for a half for Rob Jones earlier this season. 70% of the time, the spot that you said didn't matter has not even performed to expectation within the scheme and how you're calling a game, while you know that you're calling around those players because you don't have a strength and identity at those spots. So where you've chosen to spend your money, 16% of the time, you're getting a below expectation performance. And where you chose to just completely disregard it, 70%. Those are the grades for the season. Very underwhelming for the bet that this team took. And you knew what the philosophy was, and you saw that it kind of worked out for you last year, but it kind of worked out for you last year because you still had Rob Hunt, right? And Rob Hunt didn't play the whole season, but he played 500-something snaps for you. And you had better injury luck elsewhere on your roster than you did at edge or than you did this year with edge and quarterback. And that allowed you to play a game stylistically a little bit differently. Never mind the big picture conversation about playing quality competition and all that. That said, the other thing. That's a whole other can of worms I'm not trying to open right now. But the proof is in the pudding as far as the grades, the performance of the players, failing to meet expectation. Your guards, 70% of the time, they've not even reached the threshold of how you're calling games while acknowledging that you're calling games without leaning on those players to be identity pieces on your offensive line. Still underperform. Some thoughts about what this means. I think we can read between the lines on what this means for the interior guard spots and if there's any long-term pieces of the puzzle there. We'll get into that next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page as where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. As of Wednesday, 9:30 a.m., Dolphins still favored at home by -1.5. The game total has come down to 44.5. So if you're not expecting a lot of points, maybe 44.5 will wet your whistle. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more over at FanDuel. It's that time of year. The college football playoff is back, and with a newly expanded 12-team format, is guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting action and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup, SMU versus Penn State at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. So, The other part that's compounding this, and I think it's showing up now for the Dolphins with their run game, and I know Coach Eric Smith is on this a little bit. Continuity at the tackle spots kills you too, because the entire bet that was placed with this group was continuity, time in the system, and you can get into kind of the overconfidence in being able to call plays and work around deficiencies on your roster. And I understand it's a finite resource league, like all that. I get it. But that's where when you start having lack of continuity at tackle, never mind the fact that Jackson Carman shouldn't be playing in an NFL game. I think that was affirmed with the performance against Houston. I think they called a game offensively where they had to call it around the offensive line. I think the good news is Patrick Paul was your second, in my opinion, your second best offensive line. And I think he held his head above water. He created modestly above expectation for me, but it was up and down. And the reason it was up and down, there were a number of instances where assignments got muddy and guys climb into the second level, and you got an offensive lineman and you get a wide receiver pushing to the same second level player, and the next linebacker over is going untouched and chasing down the football. And a lot of that starts to change and have hiccups when you start having players churn in and out, like Patrick Paul didn't start against the Jets, plays the game against the Jets, starts against the Texans. He was a below expectation performer against Tennessee in the first start that he had this year. When Kendall Lamb first came in the lineup for Austin Jackson, he was scoring as a below expectation player. And then things stabilized a little bit, and he started grading better, and then he didn't play. And his replacement was catastrophically bad. So what you need is you need to look at that room and ask yourself, who is relied upon to be available? What is your health trend? Right? And I think that's where Terron Armstead, he's been amongst regular starters. He's the highest graded and highest performing, most consistent performing offensive player the Dolphins have this year. But the availability is undeniable, and there's a cost element with Terron Armstead. So the question is, what is the cost? Does Terron even want to play next year? Kind of sounded like he was batting around the idea of retirement. Austin Jackson has missed meaningful time in 2 of the last 3 seasons. Kendall Lamb, it was announced before the year as a retirement tour for him. So you're going to have vacancies at tackle in addition to a need for 2 starting guards. I think Patrick Paul, provided that the development that he is on and the trajectory that he is on continues for however long he continues to get opportunities this year, he is showing he has viability. Would you like maybe some competition with a young swing player? Yeah, I think that's going to be on my wish list, or at least a veteran swing player. Because I think long-term, Austin Jackson's value has never been more apparent to the team than what it is right now. And I think even if you were to make like all sweeping changes, dramatic changes, I would still want the offense to probably be a branch off of the Shanahan tree. So there should be, in theory, a lot of parallels, even if you make sweeping changes, which I don't know that sweeping changes are coming. I would hope there's changes at the top of the organization as far as the executive that's responsible for collaborating and putting together the roster. And we did that show yesterday. But I think Austin Jackson's value is apparent. And for offensive tackles, to have him down for $13 million, which is what it was the average of his new deal, it's a lot of money. But in the grand scheme of offensive tackle money relative to the value that he has as a young player, he's one I think is a piece of the puzzle despite his cost and despite the durability questions of 2 of the last 3 years, because he did stay healthy last year. He played more snaps on the offensive line last year than anybody else. And he was available for you early in his career when he was not playing well and didn't have a system that leaned into his strengths. So I think Austin Jackson, you could feel good about being your starting right tackle next year. And Patrick Paul, in the current trajectory that he's on and the play that he showcased the last month, I'm very encouraged by. So if you want that to be your, assuming Terron Armstead either rides off into the sunset or the team makes the decision to go in a different direction, I think those two things are very probable at this stage. And it's a bummer. If Terron would have rode out the season and not had these issues come up, I'd probably have come on here and say, hey, just restructure him another year and let's keep him as the third and have Patrick Paul be the swing. And, then he's got another year to develop and then he can take over as a starter in 2026. But this feels untenable now with Terron now having gone through as much of the year as what he did, missed the start against Tennessee with, I believe it was a concussion, came back, didn't miss a beat, has scored super high in every game since, and then just could not go against the Jets and could not go against the Texans. And they've alluded to rest. Are they going to rest him the rest of the year because they want to get Patrick Paul rest? I've got no idea, right? But there's an age and a cost intersection there with Terron that if he does not choose to retire, knowing the team needs more stability at tackle, as good as he's been, you're at the point where you have a separation opportunity that I think probably makes a lot of sense. That contract for Terron, I want to make sure I get the numbers right. He is owed close to $13.5 million in cash next year. And then he also has some incentive dollars, 13.3. And then he's got roster bonus payouts up to $1 million. Now he's missing time, so he'll lose some of that. And then he's got, if he makes the Pro Bowl this year, he'd get a $650,000 bonus that you'd have to pay him out for next year for this year, right? But I say all that to say, if you straight up and outright moved on before the start of the league year with Terron Armstead, without designating him as any kind of cut, you'd say about $3.5 million in cap space. And then obviously all of the cap hit for 2026, which is over $21 million plus another $4 million in 2027 in void dollars. So you're talking an extra $27 million in cap space in 2026 would be off the books if you took it all in the here and now in 2025. Or alternatively, if Terron chooses to retire, you can do the thing that teams often do, which is we're going to rewrite your contract to give you a minimum salary since we know you're not going to be collecting it. And we'll wait until after June 1st to designate your retirement. By doing that, you outright reduce the cap hit of the player at the start of the league year by whatever the difference is from what he's owed in salary to vet minimum. So by writing it down and saying, oh, well, he's not going to play this year, so we're just going to rewrite the contract and say you're actually not scheduled $13.3 million anymore. You're scheduled for $1.21 million in cap space. It would save you $12 million in cap space, and then you could process his retirement post June 1st and split the dead cap for all of the money he's already been paid and been prorated out, which would yield a little less than $8 million in dead cap for 2025, and then you would carry another $10 million in dead cap in 2026, which is still savings of $14 million and then $12 million over 2025 and 2026. So they have options and flexibility there, depending on what the answer is for how Terron wants to move forward with his career. He's been playing amazing this year. You hate to have this kind of conversation because if you didn't, and it was just Patrick Paul was going to be your swing, you'd feel pretty good about it. But I think it's time to have the honest conversation because here we are in December once again, and Jackson Carman has to play in part because Terron Armstead has the knee soreness and can't go. Creating a wish list. We've looked at the grades. We've talked about some age and cost implications for a number of the pieces, specifically at tackle where the continuity is killing you right now. We're going to get into that next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is sponsored by Prize Picks. If you love watching the game, you're going to love Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasies, whether it's football, basketball, or any of your favorite sports. Prize Picks makes your holidays bigger and brighter. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks. This holiday season, they're giving away $30 million in rewards for Picksmas and offering 2 free picks in December. When your picks hit, Prize Picks makes it easy to cash out. You can go get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. This week, give me Jared Goff, more than 230 passing yards, and Saquon Barkley for more than 1 touchdown. It's quick, simple, so much fun, easy to challenge yourself and your friends. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play just $5. Prize Picks, run your game. Did Rocket Money give you an opportunity to reassess your financials this year? I know it did for me. I actually am a huge fan that Rocket Money makes it very easy. You link your accounts and it will tell you what subscriptions you're still paying for, even if you thought you canceled them. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, the goals you want to have for next year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. So let me say this. I think you do need a premium investment in this offensive line. I think with Patrick Paul, Aaron Brewer, who's graded phenomenally well this year, Austin Jackson, I think you have pencil in 3 presumptive starters. And you're understanding you're probably going to be a more high variance position at left tackle versus Terron Armstead with Patrick Paul. But these reps are great. They're valuable. He's excelling at times while learning lessons with assignments and when you motion, how the front bumps and what that changes for your assignment and your release angle and pass protection calls when you're hot inside and the guard's got to do a double bump, which Terron Armstead talked a little bit with Kurt Benkert with Rob Jones and having to execute that and what that means for your pass set when the guard's on a double bump. There's a jelly call for that. And like those kinds of things you've seen on film where he learns the lesson the hard way with a double bump and then he sets too wide and then there's too much room and the guy runs through. So next time you got to take the set a little tighter, right? But I'm really encouraged by Patrick Paul. And I was somebody who was pretty skeptical of Patrick Paul pick. Brewer's been a phenomenal signing. Austin Jackson was on a really good trajectory. He played his best game of the season week 1, then had the regression week 2, and was on a steady upward climb for the entirety of the games that he played the rest of the year, finishing with an exclamation point. His second best game of the season was in Buffalo on that game that he ended his season with an injury there at the very end of the game. So you need 2 guards. If you told me you signed either Rob Jones or Liam Eichenberg to come back and fill the Isaiah Wynn spot on your roster for a couple $1 million with a guy with some positional flexibility, okay. Continuity in the scheme, you want to lean into those players. They're familiar with communicating with each other. Both guys are younger guys than Isaiah Wynn. Neither guy has the durability issues that Isaiah Wynn has. So if you told me one of the starters on the guard spots is back this year, back next year after being an expiring contract, but back with the intent of not starting, I'd be okay with it. But with the very clear intent that we are not bringing you back to be a starter. So I think you need 2 starters on the interior. And I think you need a swing tackle that you feel good about. That can come in a number of different ways. That can come from an early draft selection with a guy who's played tackle, that can play guard, but then in a pinch could kick out and play tackle if you needed to. Or maybe he blows you away at guard, and then Austin Jackson becomes a player that plays inside at guard and is capable of kicking outside to tackle to be the swing tackle. Like there's a variety of ways in which you can make it work. And some of these guys, I would not play that game with Patrick Paul, but Austin Jackson's lived that life. There are offensive linemen in college who have, across multiple years, played and started at multiple spots. Those kinds of guys are attractive to me because of the flexibility it gives you. You want this year's fourth best offensive lineman, which if you're including tackles, it would probably be Kendall Lamb. But if you're just looking at starters, you want this year's fourth starter to be probably your sixth or seventh best player next year. Seventh best player next year. So whatever guard you bring back, and I would assume they will probably at least look to bring one of them back because of the continuity and the experience in the scheme and some of the positional flexibility. That guy should be your seventh offensive lineman next year. Because that kind of takes you back to where those guys were in the pecking order in 2023. Just everybody got hurt, right? Connor Williams got hurt. Rob Hunt got hurt. Isaiah Wynn got hurt. And Terron Armstead gets hurt. And then lo and behold, you're playing with four backups and your ninth offensive lineman has to be a starter. But Kendall Lamb, we know, is going to be moving on. So I think you need a veteran player to fill that role as either OT3 or OT4. OT3 if you're drafting somebody who's played tackle but is going to end up being a starter for you inside. So I think you need a veteran swing tackle. I think you need two starting caliber players on the interior guard. They can ideally not both come through the draft, but if you told me they both came through the draft, okay, then I'd like one of them to at least have some long-term tackle viability as well. Because with just having a hedge there, I think your fourth tackle needs to be decently strong because of the injury history with Austin Jackson. But if you don't have the injury history of Kendall Lamb and Terron Armstead on top of the injury history with Austin Jackson, you can at least digest it a little bit better, right? So I think you got three starters that you can feel good about, even if you move on from Terron Armstead. But you need two starters. One of them ideally is a rookie. One of them is ideally a veteran player. I think you need a veteran swing. And then if you brought back one of your starting guards to be like a flex util inside guy, that would be O-lineman 7. I think that probably gets your talent level, gives you an opportunity to have your talent level be a thing that you'd feel more comfortable with. So I think you need 3 offensive linemen this offseason and then potentially bringing one of these guys back. Don't break the bank. Couple mil. You want to do 2 years, 6 mil, 2 year, 5 mil in that ballpark. Still be part of the scheme. You like it down here. Great. I think Andrew Meyer is a name not to forget. They've carried him all season on the active roster. He's never sniffed play. But if that's a true, authentic backup center, then I think maybe that leans you into Rob Jones being the one that you would keep. And I could tell you personally from my grading, Rob Jones has graded better than Liam Eichenberg. Liam Eichenberg is the worst graded starter on the offensive line for me. And he was catastrophically bad against the Texans. And some of that, I'm sure, is Jackson Carman playing next to him. But the best appeal he had was he had the center experience last year. And now you've carried for a full 53 an undrafted player at center that you seem to really like that played well in the preseason. So that's where we're at. If you told me Rob Jones and Andrew Meyer were offensive linemen 7 and 8, if you told me Jackson, Paul, and Brewer were amongst offensive linemen 1 through 6 and 3 guys in between, that's going to take some pretty investments. I'm going to throw one name out there at guard as a veteran player. This guy who's played tackle before. Hasn't necessarily played it particularly consistently. Mekhi Becton. Played last year is playing this year in Philadelphia as a right guard, playing 82% of the snaps, 26 years old. Got tackle athleticism. Now he's a supersized big dude. But he mauls people. You also have like Aaron Banks in San Francisco. I had heard they placed some inquiries around him in the offseason last year. He's a free agent this year. He's 28 years old. He's another name to watch. I think Patrick McCarry from Baltimore, who's also 28 years old, playing 95% of the snaps. Baltimore's been they just invested in Rosengarten at right tackle as a second round pick this year. They still have Ronnie Stanley, although he's a player they'll need to make a choice on as well because I think his contract voids. Do you re-sign McCarry to be the tackle? Do you just draft a tackle after you just drafted Rosengarten? They've got some young guys in the pipeline at guard. There's some names that if they hit the market and they have a decent chance to hit the market, could be possible not break the bank type players. Everybody's going to mention the name Trey Smith. He's getting 20-something $million. He's going to get more than what Rob Hunt got. And he's an awesome player. But the track record of success transplanting a player for that kind of money into a new front, historically, and I've done the research on it, is not particularly good. So that's where I'm at. Let me know where you're at. Leave some comments. Let me know if you got any players on your wish list. Josh Connerly from Oregon, my number one draft crush for the Dolphins on the offensive line. But we'll get into all those things in the months ahead. I'm Kyle Krabs. You can keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. Appreciate you guys, as always, for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. I'm out of here. Go Fins.